Face Above Fitcast powered by Easier, Health Now, Education Now, Pay Later. Featuring today the unstoppable Maitri Bokhel as a nutritionist, exercise physiologist, and an Ironman competitor with numerous marathons under her belt. Maitri shares game changing insights on smashing your fitness goals. From cutting edge nutrition tips to breaking down exercise myths, this episode is your ticket to peak performance. Tune in to supercharge your fitness journey. Welcome to the Race Above podcast. And we would like to know more about Maitri. So, what exactly brought you into this athletic journey and how did it all start?
Thank you so much, Kunjal. It's such a pleasure being here, and I love your initiative of spreading as much knowledge about fitness and nutrition to athletes because they put in so much of their physical and mental energy into being better, being better athletes. And a lot of us also have day jobs which don't involve being professional athletes, so it is tough being an age grouper. So I really appreciate this initiative. With me, I'm a classical dancer, and way back when in 2006, when I had to give my first stage performance, which is called as the Arangetram, I really wanted to be fit because it was my solo performance, and that's how I think I got into running. I had the home gym, I started training, and I really, really loved it. My first half marathon was just a fluke. I'm Pune based, so we have this lovely Pune International Marathon happening, and me and my mom had registered for 10 kilometers, and 10 kilometers finished, and then she's like, go, 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 you can go on. So that's how I ended up running my first 21-kilometer run, and that was way back when, I think, somewhere around 2011, 2012, or maybe even earlier, maybe 2009 types. And I've just been in love with running since then. It's so easy. You just put on a pair of shoes and go out and run. And I think I have a very good friend at that time who was doing his Ironman, where we had not even heard of that term in India, and I used to run with him during his brick workouts and stuff like that. And then I went on to study in the US, where definitely as a student doing a triathlon is a dream. So I again resorted to running. I ran there, I taught fitness there, I studied fitness and nutrition there, and came back. And Ironman 70.3 was being launched in India for the first time. So I took the plunge and have been a triathlete since.
Super. That's very inspirational, and that sounds so easy to just run at any moment. That's amazing. Okay.
I think back then it was simpler. Now it's very complicated because when you run, there are so many people running, so many questions being asked. I feel like somewhere the joy of just going out to a ground or just going out to a track and running is somewhere lost in our highly competitive and highly driven athletic community. But yes, during when I started running, it was easier.
Right, right. And it was very new as well, I suppose. That is the time when running was introduced to India. Yeah. Okay. So, Maitri, you hold an expertise in exercise physiology. So, how does it relate to you, and what does that term mean?
So exercise physiology is like the art of exercise. It's taking exercise out of the gym bro, community. It is the art of taking exercise out of I have to go and kill myself on the run or in this workout. It is actually the beauty of exercise and how it helps our body to recover, to feel good at every stage in our life, regardless of whether we are fit and fabulous, regardless of whether we are going through an emotional event, whether we have a chronic condition like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, PCOS, or whether we have a more serious condition like cancer or something autoimmune. Exercise is always our best friend. And so many times our society tells us to actually not exercise and sit steady and rest, but it is actually exercise which is going to help us so much in terms of increasing our confidence, increasing our self-efficacy. It is going to help us to relearn and relive our life and feel better about ourselves in the given situation that we are in. So in technical terms, exercise is how our physiology or how our body response to exercise, both in the short term, that is the acute response of our body to exercise, and in the long term, or the chronic response of our body to exercise.
Okay. So, according to you, Maitri, before we get more into the specifics of exercise physiology, which is in itself a very complex field, can you give our listeners a brief overview of why understanding the exercise physiology is very important for any athlete or even a common person in his or her day to day lifestyle?
This is a great question because so many times people refrain from exercising because they can't exercise enough, or they can't meet the guidelines of exercise in terms of the frequency, which is, we usually recommend a minimum of 20 minutes of exercise per day, or a minimum of 30 minutes 3 times a week to meet the guidelines, which is 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, right? But let me tell you that even a single bout of exercise session has amazing benefits on both your physical health and your mental health. So physically, it increases the demand of oxygen, right? Our heart rate increases, our breath increases. So what happens is it increases the number of muscle mitochondria, which are basically the units on the cell where cellular respiration takes place. It has amazing benefits on our insulin sensitivity. The more you exercise, the lesser insulin you need to take in all of the carbohydrates, and that has some great role to play in prevention or reversal of type 2 diabetes. It also increases the number of muscle proteins. So, why is there this whole craze of eating protein when you're exercising? So what happens is, when we exercise, our muscles get stressed, and they sort of have a few micro tears. Now, to repair the micro tears, the body puts or lays down even more muscle protein. So the size of our individual muscle fibers becomes bigger. Now, when we do that, what happens is our immunity, our balance, all of that really, really improves. Our cognition, all of that really improves, even with a single bout of exercise. Mentally, when we exercise, so many helpful neurotransmitters are released, like serotonin, noradrenaline, epinephrine, dopamine. All of these basically increase our feeling of accomplishment. We feel like we've done something good, and which is why we feel so good after exercise. They also play a huge role in calming us down, in reducing our stress levels, and increasing our quality of life. So we find so many people who hesitate to exercise, but once they've done even 20 minutes of a suitable exercise session for them, they feel great. So it is not really how many times you can exercise, but even if you know that you can exercise only twice a week and you consistently do that, it is much better than not exercising at all.
Maitri, having a background in exercise physiology, you also have a widely based knowledge in nutrition. So, according to you, how is nutrition and exercise as a physiologist, how do you think, or according to you, how are these two disciplines intersected with each other, and how can each be beneficial to individual if they are taken simultaneously in a proper proposition?
So since we're targeting endurance athletes, they expect a lot out of themselves, and they're usually the ones to really beat up their bodies for the run and for whatever endurance activity they choose. So fueling is even more important than actually executing the endurance activity, because that comes easy to them. See, running, swimming, cycling, rowing, whatever the activity may be, has already been registered at the spinal level. So you wake them up from their sleep and you ask them to run a 50K run, they will say yes. But what really needs training is to learn to eat so that they get maximum benefits from the activity. Okay. If you don't fuel right, if you are not taking in enough fuel, the one thing that's going to get compromised is your protein, because protein is a very versatile macronutrient, and it's a very versatile substrate in the body that will also function as an energy donor. And if it is consumed in excess and there is lack of physical activity, it will get stored as fat. So people who don't eat enough and train a lot, they fall sick very often. because their muscle protein is getting really catabolized. So if you want to not fall sick, if you want to make sure that you're getting maximum benefits out of actually doing the endurance activity, you need to fuel right. Now, fueling is of two types. There is the food which you have to consume, and there is the hydration which you have to do. Now, depending on the time and the intensity of your activity, the food that you eat also differs. The higher the intensity, the more the oxygen demand, but the shorter the amount of time, the higher is your need for carbohydrates, because carbohydrate is that one macronutrient that is the body's most favorite source of energy, because it doesn't require much oxygen to break it down. Okay. Whereas fat, which we all of us want to lose fat, and all of us, so many people resort to endurance activities to lose fat. But what happens is the process of fat loss is really very difficult for the body. Okay, it requires a lot of oxygen consumption continuously over a long period of time, and then eventually you will see your fat stores going down. But and even then, to maintain your blood sugar levels, you still need to be eating carbohydrates. So nutrition is not as easy as simply just eating whatever you want on a run, or not eating anything because you don't feel like it and eating everything after a run. That could be too late. That could really not be a great idea for your muscle protein stores. Now changing gears to the hydration part of nutrition. All of us sweat. At the very thought of going for a run or going for a long swim can cause increased rate of breathing in some people because of the anxiety, right? So that is again water loss, okay, through our breath. Sweat, all of us know, is salty and is not water, but is some major electrolytes like sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. If these are not replenished, and these are required for every single muscle contraction requires all of these electrolytes. So when you don't replenish the electrolytes which are lost through the sweat, your muscle contraction is not going to be as efficient. You're going to get tired and you're going to cramp, because the muscle is sort of contracting without any substance in it. So that is why nutrition is very, very important. And what makes it tougher is that the body is very resilient. Okay, it will not tell you that it's hungry or thirsty till it's too late. So this is when actually training the body in the infancy stages of your discipline to eat and drink appropriately is very, very important if you want to go far and ahead in your chosen endurance sport.
Okay.
So which is why nutrition is so important.
Great. That was an in-depth knowledge of, how it goes in synchronization with each other. That was amazing.
I'm
Okay.
glad.
So, yeah. Okay. So, Maitri, according to you, or, could you share some exciting advancements in exercise physiology that have the potential to revolutionize the way we approach our training and performance?
So many years back, when we have a chronic condition, or when we have cancer, or when we have an autoimmune condition, exercise was the last thing on our primary healthcare physician's mind, or on our mind, because we are dealing with chemotherapy, we're dealing with loss of energy, we're dealing with so many things. And at this point, if somebody tells you get up and exercise, it's like, are you crazy? But now there is so much research which shows that actually exercise really helps increase the blood flow throughout the body. It increases your appetite, because in during these conditions, appetite can get suppressed because of the medicines, because of the treatment, and because sometimes you are just in a blue state of mind, and you may also not feel like eating. So the stimulation of appetite, the eating of food, and hence improvement in mental state or mental health is so important. And this has actually shown to increase the recovery rates, or increase the remission rates for women in breast cancer, in autoimmune conditions, which I think is great. And exercise is being propagated on a large scale. And I know we're talking about endurance sports, but so many people in endurance sports also have similar experiences. And so many times I've heard that or I've had clients tell me that it was only because of my running background or my strength background that I could go through all of those cycles of chemotherapy, radiation, that I had the resilience. But now, research also says that you can engage in moderate to light intensity aerobic or very, very light intensity musculoskeletal training, whatever suits you, even when you are in the treatment, which I think is amazing. um, the second myth that exercise physiology breaks, I think, at least in a country like India, where I see a lot of women over the age of 60, having always looked after their house and their kids and their husbands and never themselves, and here I'm telling them to exercise and actually lift weights, and they look at me as if I'm telling them to go to Mars. um, but and so many of them believe, and even the men, they believe that what gains can be made at this age? Haven't we lived our life? Isn't it our time to quietly rest and retire? But actually, the muscle is such an amazing organ, and the body is so amazing that if you give it what it needs, which is basically movement and balanced nutrition, it produces miracles at any age. So I highly advocate everybody sitting here hearing this to encourage their mothers, their mother-in-laws, their aunts, their uncles, whoever is not exercising, to please start exercising, and if possible actually lift weights, because it really helps maintain or improve their balance. It improves their gait, it improves their posture, it improves their confidence. Lifting does not mean going into the gym and lifting heavy weights. It could just mean using therabands with the assistance of an exercise physiologist or a very qualified trainer who has experience with this population, and doing it religiously. So I think those two things are something that I encourage in everybody: strength training, exercising, regardless of where you are. And again, that's the beauty of exercise physiology.
Right. That's rightly said, because nowadays you can see more of that age group coming forward for themselves, and they want to go, be it even a small yoga session which would help them in stretching, having that good feel of they've completed, they've achieved something, and then the entire day goes off good. So, like, even if we speak of normal groups or
Absolutely.
colonies or whichever, which conduct at least once or twice in a week, they make it a point that they are gathered, they are doing that specifically for that age group. So that is a good initiative which is inculcated by people only, and it's that need of the moment which that age group is also feeling to get into it.
I feel like, let me just add something here. Let me add something here. I feel like many times I see women supporting their husbands who are doing ultra endurance and endurance activities, thinking that it's their right, and they have to take the back seat and look after the house and the kids, and but I feel like even they have the equal right to look after themselves. They don't have to put in so many hours in ultra endurance, but definitely half an hour to 45 minutes of weightlifting a couple of times a week will be miraculous for them.
Right.
um
That's
so
beneficial
yeah,
for themselves, along with being a support system to the entire family.
absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, Maitri, when we speak of endurance sports, or when we speak of people as a whole, we see two to three set of people. One who is rigorously into the self-endurance sport, having competitions, challenges in front of them. The other, which we see, is strength-based competitions, which is also picking up in the new generations and also in the mid-age generations as of now. We come to the third set, which is again the normal household females who are coming up with yoga sessions, just to make them active, be fit, and not just be lethargic for the entire day. So we see these three set of people when we come to our surroundings. So, can you explain how understanding an individual's unique physiology can help them to tailor, or when they are stuck? So, when it's a newcomer, they are stuck. Okay, whether should I go in self endurance? Whether should I go in strength training? Whether should I just be sticking to just being active, having a small walk with friends or colleagues after lunch? We see many times in our corporate offices that people are just having a walk after their lunch or breakfast or something like that. So, according to you, how should one go ahead and deciding of what stream in terms of the exercise should they go accordingly, and what are the criteria to take into consideration while selecting one?
That's a very good question, and it's and you are reiterating the feeling of so many people who feel like they have to choose a certain type of exercise. Here I'm going to tell you that there are 5 components of fitness and you have to do them all. It's not about doing endurance or doing strength. It's about doing both. Okay. So different type of exercise targets different parts of the body, different systems of the body. There are 5 components of fitness, like I said earlier. The last component of fitness is our main motivation, that is body composition. All of us get into exercise to improve our body composition so that we have good amount of muscle, we have smaller amount of fat, we have good bone mineral density, all of that. Okay, we can go on our daily life, maybe even travel solo, pick up our bags, look after our kids, all of that. That is improved body composition. The 4 components of fitness which are going to help you improve your body composition are cardiovascular fitness, muscle strength, muscle endurance, and flexibility. Okay, so now here's the question: how do you choose? You don't choose, you do them all, but you do one that you like more often. All the runners have to strength train, they have to undergo a flexibility session, they cannot just keep running, right? And I mean, even you know this, if you only run without doing any of the accessory workouts, chances of injuries increase so much. Muscle strength really increases the strength of not only the muscle but more importantly the connective tissue, the ligaments and tendons, so you make them more resilient. So there are 2 types of muscle fibers. There is the short twitch muscle fiber and the long twitch muscle fiber. So the short twitch muscle fiber or the type 2 muscle fibers are developed in the gym. They are the small explosive muscle fibers which are going to help you sprint your last 100 meters of a 50-kilometer race. That is developed in the gym in strength training. That's going to help you climb up your hills, when you're cycling, etc. What is muscle endurance? Muscle endurance is the amount of time you can contract muscle against resistance. So you take a resistance, it could be as simple as your own body weight. How many push-ups can you do? How many pull-ups can you do? How many times can you go up this hill running? All of that is muscle endurance. Then flexibility is self-explanatory. It's how much you can stretch a joint, or can you take a joint through its full range of motion and can you hold it there for at least 30 seconds. So all of these components are required to make you a well-rounded, fit person. If you want to try your hand at endurance sports, you can definitely do more of muscle endurance, which is which is not muscle endurance, sorry, cardiovascular endurance, which is basically running or swimming or cycling. But in the process of that, you will realize that your coach is giving you hill repeats, which is muscle endurance. They are asking you to strength train. They are asking you to also do maybe a day of yoga. So ultimately, it does become a whole rounded approach. And I highly recommend that. I do not recommend that you just stick to one discipline. Okay. With regards to the corporate people who walk, now here's the thing. There are 2 thought processes about walking. Walking is something that is not new to us. We've been doing that since the time we learned how to walk. Okay. If people cannot make any time in the day for anything else, then walking is better than not doing anything. If there are people who can make time for other things too, but they prefer walk, they like to walk as their way to improve their cardiovascular fitness, because walking is only cardiovascular fitness, then I would say that, instead of walking at the same time, the same distance, experiment with your walk. Go fast-paced, go easy-paced, walk back, walk sideways, fast-paced, easy-paced, so that you can improve it. If you just keep walking the same distance, the same time, you feel good about yourself that you've done something, and it produces mild cardiovascular benefits, but you still remain in the gray zone. You're not producing some substantial cardiovascular benefits. And also remember, you're not targeting the other 3 components of fitness. There is no muscle strength, there's no muscle endurance, and there's no flexibility happening. So yeah.
That's just for mental satisfaction.
So as an exercise physiologist,
yeah,
correct. as an exercise physiologist, I would definitely say if you can't do anything else, please walk. But in that limited time that you have, do experiment with it, get creative with it. Don't just walk on the same pavement every day. Walk on an undulating pavement, walk fast, walk slow. So at least that one component is being utilized to its fullest. And wherever you can, stretch. Wherever you can, invest in 2 pairs of dumbbells and do a full body routine. How much time does it take? Not much.
Right, right, right.
But yeah.
So priorities. We need to set our priorities clear. Okay, okay. So, Maitri, in your entire career, have you encountered any myth-busting movements where exercise physiology research contradicted commonly held beliefs in the world of sports and fitness?
Yes, yes. So, so exercise is that one thing that is literally going to save you from dying. For example, people who are overweight, whom we commonly call obese, who basically have a body mass index or a BMI of more than 35 kg per meter square, and we look at them and we think, needs to exercise, needs to eat right. If they exercise, without them losing weight, they still stand a chance of having a better quality life than the ones who are thin and not exercising, or the ones who are they weigh as much as them but are not exercising. So it is just by virtue of exercise that their entire life is revolved. Basically, it takes a 180-degree turn, and this is called as an obesity paradox. So we have a metabolically active fat component in our body, which is called as the brown adipose tissue, and we have the metabolically inactive component, which only releases inflammatory signals in our body, which is called as the white adipose tissue. As kids, we had more brown adipose, less white. Just as the process of growing up started, we have more white, less brown. People who are more active have more brown adipose tissue. So even in those who are like really, really obese, if they start exercising, and I'm not talking about intense exercise, if they do 10 minutes of exercise twice a day, they still stand a chance at really living their entire lifespan and good quality lifespan if they continue that exercising behavior throughout their life. And they do not need to lose weight. They convert their they convert their phenotype from metabolically unhealthy obese to metabolically healthy obese. And I think that is so great because obesity is a disease, and when you tell somebody who has a disease which is going to be with them maybe forever, that if you just exercise, you are going to get 50% of the quality of your life back. I think that is like a magic wand to them because they have almost lost hope. Everybody's telling them, do this, do that, you're not doing enough. And it's like an iceberg. What we see is the tip of the iceberg, and underneath is so many emotions. There's depression, there is self-berating, there's probably a ton of eating disorders over there. So I think this is the brilliant part about exercise, that just exercising will help them gain a lot of their life back, which I think is amazing.
Okay, Maitri, a very layman or a very generalistic question. What is the difference between exercise physiology and a physiotherapy?
No, I think it's a great question. I think layman's come up with the most fantastic questions. So a physiotherapist is somebody who deals with musculoskeletal injuries. He or she will actually correct musculoskeletal imbalances. If there has been a fracture, if there is a tear or sprain, then they will be the ones who will be actually, correcting or going to that specific group of the musculoskeletal tissue and advising exercises, supervising exercises. They also conduct a lot of recovery modules, like they will do cupping, they can do acupuncture, they're trained in all of that as well. They also do a lot of cardiac rehabilitation, as in if somebody has had a heart attack or if somebody has had a brain stroke, then they would be the first people to sort of get these people back moving. It's called cardiovascular physiotherapy. They would be the people to help those with neurological disabilities to move. If there are children on the autism spectrum, if there is a Down syndrome child, if there is a cerebral palsy child, then neurophysios are the ones who really monitor their progress. They're the ones who will give them guided exercise movements. So that is the role of a physiotherapist. An exercise physiologist comes into the picture much later, when all we need is a physician's consent to then put them on a supervised exercise program. We do not go into the depths of musculoskeletal injuries, or we do not make musculoskeletal corrections. That is the role of a physiotherapist. So many times we work hand in hand with physiotherapists. So many times we work hand in hand with the patient's primary care physician, because the health industry is an interdisciplinary industry. So many times the physiotherapist will have a list of exercises which or movements which should be done, and then we would put the exercises for the movements, or list of movements which should not be done. So that is the difference.
Okay. So, one more question which arises from this, that if an athlete has faced an injury, be it in a long run, a swim, or an ultra, or a triathlete, so they should consider going to physiotherapy first, or going to exercise physiologist first, according to you. And in that,
A
what are the
physiotherapist.
criteria? A physiotherapist? If it's an intense, because see, what happens many a time, an athlete is not, might not be so much of aware that okay, I have a serious injury which has led to a disorder, and they might just feel that it's a normal wear and tear which might have happened, and taking a little bit of more time than expected to recover fully from that. So, what are the criteria of differentiation between these factors?
So, as an exercise physiologist, we don't treat any injury. If it is something related to injury, then I would be the first person to send out a referral to the physiotherapist, because then that is not something that comes in my professional expertise. On the same page, a physiotherapist is not somebody who, subscribes exercise charts. Then they would send out a referral to me. So, if the injury is mild or severe, is not for me to decide, or is not for the patient to decide. It is only for the physiotherapist to
The
decide.
first thing which anyone should do is go to physiotherapist and then look a way out from there.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Go to a physiotherapist, or if it's really doesn't look good, then maybe go to an orthopedic surgeon, and then they would give out a referral. Yeah.
Maitri, can you explain the role of exercise physiologist in working with individuals who have chronic health conditions, and how does their expertise differ from other healthcare professionals when it comes to exercise prescriptions?
Right. So in exercise physiology, every exercise routine is based on 4 principles. This is called as a fit principle. So we plan exercises according to the frequency, intensity, type of exercise, and the time required to complete an exercise. So in case of chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, PCOS, and depending on the patient's history, a physician consent may be taken to grant him or her clear for the exercise schedule. That's the first thing. Now, once that is done, depending on their fitness level, they will be given a comprehensive fitness chart which covers all the 5 components like I discussed earlier. So the 5 components of fitness are muscle strength, muscle endurance, cardiovascular fitness, flexibility, and to improve their body composition. Body composition being the 5th. These fitness components will be covered at suitable frequencies, intensities, type of exercise, and time of exercise. Other health professionals with whom we work closely are basically physical therapists who deal with musculoskeletal injuries or adaptations which have happened due to neurological issues. They will deal with the patient first, and then we would. So they have a different protocol, based on their whatever they do. But the way we operated, we would operate within a realm of the fit principle. So, for example, if a person who's just had a heart attack and who's cleared to exercise comes to me with his or her physician clearance, depending on his or his history, I would put him on aerobic exercise, maybe 2 days a week. 2 days a week of musculoskeletal exercise. That would be the frequency. The intensity would be the intensity of the exercise is basically calculated on 2 principles. It's calculated either on age predicted maximum heart rate, and it's calculated on the rate of perceived exertion. So after calculating his or her age predicted maximum heart rate, given the fact that they've just had a heart attack, intensity would be 50 to 60%, not very high. And the rate of perceived exertion is basically a scale of 10 points. The intensity would be again 50 to 60%, so anywhere between 5 to 6, where 9 is really, really hard. The type of exercise would be, if they're not used to doing strength training, then I would put them on resistance bands to start with. I would give them, the exercise balls instead of putting them on dumbbells or barbells, which requires more core strength, which requires, a certain level of preconditioning. In terms of aerobic exercise, I would definitely put them on 2 days of 20 minutes, just a mild walk, because they're getting back. They're getting back after a very rigorous surgery. I would put them on 10 minutes of a stretching routine so that we cover the flexibility component also. And then you come to the last part, that is the time required to complete this exercise. That is the last principle of the fit principle. The time required to complete muscle strength would be as much time as it takes to cover all muscle groups, using resistance bands, using TheraBands, using balls. Okay. In terms of aerobic exercise, I already said I would put them on 2 weeks of 20 minutes of an easy walk. Flexibility, I already said I would put them on 10 minutes. Muscle endurance, which is basically how much time you can contract a muscle against resistance. Slowly, maybe 3-4 weeks into the schedule, we would put the treadmill on an incline. So then we introduce the component of muscle endurance as well. So that is how exercise physiologists work.
Okay, okay. So when we speak, Maitri, about specifically about people who've just got chronic health issues, they at the start would be very hesitant because of they not feeling well, or because any chronic injury comes with a trauma. Okay, why did I suffer this? They go in a reverse calculation that why did this happen to me? I'm like, what did I do wrong? And it happens to them, and that leads to restrictions in every movement. That might lead to not going out that frequent the way they were used to. So in that sense, I'm like, in that scenario, how would you take them, how would you guide them to take the first step towards better health and fitness, and how would you motivate them that okay, this is what is going to help you out further? Of course, because everyone would not be that much inclined to exercising regime, because in India, having a normal hectic work life is the only regime everyone is used to it. Getting into that exercise regime, eating healthy, and again, of course, due to the prescriptions of the doctors, they might be not even willingly but might be going to have a nutrition rich diet. But according to you, how would you deal with this situation?
That's a great question, because especially in a developing country like India, we think taking care of ourselves is a luxury. We think exercising and eating healthy is only reserved for a certain class of people. Uh, you know, um, and that is not true. The one thing your body needs, literally the only thing your body needs, is good nutrition and movement. Okay. So I will definitely start off by telling them that they are different from everybody else. The level of exercise that a person or their neighbor does not have to be the same as what they need to do. At this point, you only need to look at yourself. You need to look at how you want to live the rest of your life. uh, do you want to live it as somebody who cannot move their hands and legs to their fullest potential only because you have not tried? Or do you want to be that person who does try, goes through some level of discomfort in terms of hesitation and musculoskeletal tightness in the initial sessions of exercise before really enjoying it? Exercise is also breathing for the body. Unless you have exercised, you just have not really, your body has not been breathing, because the way we breathe in exercise, we don't breathe like that otherwise. So at the deepest molecular level, our small cells have not gotten oxygenated. So, and I would also tell them that it would be a good idea to exercise, because even if it is for 10 minutes, because for 10 minutes, they're focusing on other variables other than their illness and other than their doctor visits and other than who said what. And even if it is 10 minutes, it can make a world of a difference, even for their mental health. So I would definitely encourage them to try it.
Okay. Okay, so Maitri, as we all know, nutrition plays a private role not only in athlete but also in everyone's life to be healthy, to be fit. Uh, to get started, can you explain why nutrition is often called the fourth principle or fourth discipline in endurance sport? And also, what drew you from being a exercise physiologist to coming into the nutrition part or being a nutritionist?
So I did touch upon this a little bit earlier that if you expect to gain maximum out of the endurance sport that you have chosen, if you expect to cognitively be there at every kilometer that you cross, at every milestone you hit in your race, your blood sugar needs to be at a certain level, and that can only be there if you eat and drink appropriately. So that is why nutrition is so important, and that is why it's called as a fourth discipline, because your body on autopilot can keep going, but if it has no substance to act on, a, you will lose a lot of your protein, b, your blood sugar levels could go seriously low, causing hypoglycemia. If you're not replenishing the electrolytes lost in sweat, which is again a nutritional strategy, your body will just not be able to reach its fullest potential in terms of speed, in terms of stamina, in terms of strength, even mental health. You want to be happy when you're doing the endurance activity. You want to have full focus. You don't want to have a brain fog. So many times when we get up and train, sometimes we feel like something is just not right. Something is not right. Oh my God, I forgot to have dinner yesterday. So, relating these small things, but you didn't have a good dinner yesterday, your sleep quality got compromised, you couldn't really enjoy that lovely workout session that you wanted to. So nutrition is very, very important. It is difficult because so many of us don't feel like eating or drinking when we exercise. And like I said earlier, the body is very resilient. It will keep trying to be sustainable till it reaches at like an end point. So we have to recognize that, and we have to start eating and drinking before we actually feel like eating and drinking, to exploit our endurance sports to its fullest potential. And as to explain my journey to you, I actually was a nutritionist first, and then I became an exercise physiologist. So I did my undergrad in nutrition and dietetics, and I did my master's because I felt like I hadn't learned enough about nutrition after my undergrad, but I wanted to do something in exercise. Then I got a degree in in nutrition and exercise physiology, because my first love continues to be exercise. I wanted to do something in it.
Okay, that's a wonderful combination because you often find nutritionists who are not much well versed with the exercise part, or an exercise part but not well versed with nutrition. So you have to go and wander for both. I'm like, you have to go and get in contact with both of them, but a combination works fine always. Okay, so Maitri, we've come across many a time that nutrition plays an optimal role in oxygen delivering in your entire body. How would you, if if this terminology comes in front of you, how would you like to clarify on this, or how would you like to bring more of the highlight on this point?
So, first of all, we have to recognize what is blocking oxygen delivery. It is the plaques and the bad cholesterol that has been deposited in our arteries, which is blocking the flow of blood to certain parts of the body. It could be the heart causing a heart attack. It could be the brain causing a stroke. It could be some vital organs like pancreas or something. With the help of a balanced nutrition plan, including lots of fiber, which is found in vegetables, in fruits, in whole wheat, in legumes, lentils, and beans. A diet which is low in saturated fat, and doing that for a long time, not just a week or 2 weeks, because these conditions don't happen overnight. Plaque builds up over many, many years of, not the best eating habits and not the best lifestyle habits. You also want to keep your lifestyle consistent. You want to have consistent sleep wake timings. You want to keep the levels of your stress, easier said than done, as low as possible. Because if you are continuously stressed, then the secretion of stress hormone is not great for your insulin sensitivity. Insulin sensitivity goes down, chances of developing diabetes increase. So, it's all interrelated. So, if you are eating well, if you're drinking water, then there is a chance that we could remove these plaques out of the system. we could remove these blockages out of the system and increase the rate at which blood flows to all of these major muscles. And blood has the hemoglobin pigment, which is the oxygen carrying molecule, right? So it increases the oxygen delivery to the major muscles. Also, if you are eating right, the chances of you having low iron levels are less. If you are supplementing properly, chances of you having low iron are less. If your iron levels are good, then your body is going to make good quality red blood cells, or it's going to have good amount of erythropoiesis, that is the formation of red blood cells. Then it is going to increase the oxygen delivery to the working muscles. Exercising also, if you have hypertension, good nutrition will also give you or increase the rate at which your blood vessels relax or increase vasodilation. If you're consuming foods which have good nitrate in them, like grapes, like beetroot, like cherries, pomegranate, it's going to really help that. So all of these things will increase the oxygen delivery to the muscles,
Okay, okay.
nutrition wise.
Nutrition wise. Okay. So we'll have one more question on your nutrition background. How, according to you, should be, consumed more when athletes are in the rest and recovery days of that after race or, training period of time? So, what nutrition factors they should consider on a greater level?
Yeah. So there is a very nice visual representation of what is called as an athlete's plate by the University of Colorado, and it is available on Google. Everybody can just Google athlete's plate, and they have a lovely visual representation of how much of the plate should be carbohydrates, how much should be a protein, how much should be vegetable. So that's a great place for everybody to start off. But if I were to answer this question, it all depends on what your athletic goals are and what your coach has suggested. So definitely eat foods which are going to increase the recovery process. You want to include a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables of different colors. So polyphenols, amino acids, nitrates, which increase the recovery process, will be consumed. You want to make sure that you're eating good quality protein. If you are somebody who eats animal protein, that is going to be a better idea, because they are complete protein sources. If you are a vegetarian athlete, then you want to make sure that you're eating a combination of vegetable foods, like dal chawal, like roti and dal, or like yogurt, which will then give you the complete amino acid profile, which will enhance your recovery, which will prevent your immune system, which is really taking a hitting in your training sessions. It will give your immune system a chance to get a reboot. Fat is also a very, very important component of reducing inflammation and helping accelerating the recovery process. Keep your diet low in saturated fat. Unsaturated fat is found in nuts, it is found in seeds, it is found in avocados. But in India, if you don't want to do avocados, you can always do almonds and walnuts, the most basic. Flax seeds, chia seeds, these are all great sources of omega-3 fatty acids, or the unsaturated fat. What else was I going to say? Wait, I have touched on protein, I have touched on fat. Depending on the athletic goals, and depending on what kind of sport you are in, how much carbohydrate to eat is your choice. If you're completely resting on that day, the energy expenditure is going to be a little bit lower. So I'm not saying you have to eliminate carbohydrates completely. Never do that. You can eat more or less depending on which stage of training you are in. Always want to keep your vitamin D and B12 levels topped up, because recovery is accelerated if your vitamin D and B12 levels are where they need to be. Consuming magnesium, zinc are also very, very good supplements which will aid in recovery. Potassium through bananas, through fruits, through yogurt will definitely help accelerate the recovery.
Okay, okay. So that covers our nutrition part of recovery. What specific training and nutrition strategies can help athletes harness the potential of the muscle fiber types?
Right. So depending on what is the type of training, I think I briefly touched on this in the previous one of the previous questions. where the type 2 muscle fibers, which are the smaller, more explosive fibers, are dependent more on glucose. So if you have a hard intensity training block, like if you have an interval training, or if you have hill repeats, or if you're swimming with hand paddles and with resistance basically, so just understand that the amount of carbohydrates you need are going to be higher, because your shorter, smaller, and more explosive fibers are being used. So you always want to make sure that you're eating carbohydrates before, during, and after the session, to sort of make sure that the quality of that session does not get compromised. The type 1 muscle fibers are the longer, leaner fibers, which also use both carbohydrates and fat, but they use more fat, because they are the endurance muscle fibers. So when you go on long runs, the solution here is to not eat fat during the workout. The solution is to not starve, to not go on crash diets leading up to your run. You want to eat well, you want to eat a balanced diet of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, okay, so that you are nutritionally healthy. And on the run, you still need to maintain your carbohydrate intake to prevent your blood sugar levels from coming down, like I said earlier, and prevent you from becoming hypoglycemic. Even if by virtue of the duration of the workout, you're using more fat for fuel, to maintain your blood sugar and your liver glucose stores, you want to keep eating a minimum of 60 gram carbohydrate per hour. The rule of thumb for any exercise session, be it hard session or an easy endurance session, is 1 gram carbohydrate per kg body weight 1 hour during the session. After the session, you want to have a mix of carbohydrate and protein, with a majority being carbohydrate. A 2:1 or a 3:1 ratio of carbohydrate to protein should be consumed after the workouts, instead of just having a protein shake, because like I said, protein is a very versatile macronutrient. If you have protein instead of having carbohydrates, it's going to function as carbohydrates, which is not the best. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. So, Maitri, according to you, for athletes who are looking to optimize their recovery between intense training sessions, what types of low impact exercises would you recommend, and how would you want them to aid that with nutrition to adapt the most of the recovery days?
Yeah, so depend on the training schedules given by their coaches. Rest can either be complete rest or it could be active recovery, where low impact aerobic exercises can be included. They increase blood supply to the working muscles, and this is how we use it to sort of help in the recovery. This can be swimming, it could be light indoor cycling, it could be the use of resistance bands and easy walking. So, nutrition wise, foods which enhance recovery, like I said earlier, are colorful fruits and vegetables. They contain polyphenols, which provide antioxidants, and amino acids like L-citrulline, beetroot, watermelons, grapes, pomegranates should be included. Proteins, especially animal proteins, must be included. Like I said earlier, levels of D and B12 need to be topped up. Yogurt is a great probiotic, which I highly recommend all athletes consume. If you are a vegan, then you would benefit from taking a probiotic supplement. Yogurt is also a good source of potassium. Nuts and seeds, which are great sources of unsaturated fatty acid, magnesium, and zinc, should also be used. And like I said earlier, the amount of carbohydrates can be monitored depending on what is the sport that person is engaged in, and what is his or her weight goal, performance goal, and all of that. Please do not eliminate carbohydrates, but it's a good idea to consult a sports nutritionist before eating the amounts.
Right. So, as a nutritionist, how would you, I mean, like, would you suggest people who are more inclined in the new age diets, like paleo diets, keto, intermediate fasting, to get into that? Or because, we've come across many individuals who are like, say no to carbohydrates completely, or say no to eating at this point of time. So, how would you go ahead with the new advancement in the nutrition part, which is being coming up more of lately?
Well, you cannot eliminate food groups. That is not something a qualified nutritionist would ever suggest, because carbohydrates are the body's most um, easily or most economical sources of energy. And as an athlete, if you want to make sure that you're recovering on time, you have good energy, you don't have any brain fog, then you need to be consuming a small amount of carbohydrates. It does not have to be a huge helping. It also take carbohydrates include fiber, both soluble and non-soluble, which are very, very important for maintaining the health of your digestive system. So, here's the thing: if you are on any of these diets and you are engaged in an endurance sports which requires a certain amount of energy, then at least for the duration of the sport, I would encourage consumption of some carbohydrates. Then once you're done with the sport, you can go back to your fat diet and be happy. That's fine.
Okay, so we've learned a lot about nutrition, exercise, physiologist. We are yet on that, but we would like to know Maitri more. So let's bring out the runner part of Maitri. So, what are your aspirations when it comes to running? How are you planning yourself? Where do you see as a challenge when it comes to running? So, what are you doing nowadays?
Nowadays, I'm just fresh off the Half Ironman World Championship in Lahti, Finland, which happened on 26th of August, and I'm going into the Half Ironman happening in India, Goa, on the 8th of October. So currently, just training for that. As a runner, running is always my home. It's my happy space. Um, and only of late I have started challenging myself on the run. Earlier, it was more about going out and running, like I said earlier. Um, I think having a good run for me is holding a pace that maybe I did not think was possible, and hydrating and fueling at that pace, which could be hard, which requires a lot of practice. For me, it's not about the race, but it's about how I function as an individual on the race, being able to take the race stress, then realizing that I'm only running for myself, I'm not answerable to anybody else, and following my own nutrition and hydration guidelines to the T would be a winner for me. I have an athlete who is going to be running the Berlin Marathon, and she's from South Africa. And couple of days back, we were planning her nutrition strategy, and she said, "I'll do whatever you say, just tell me what to do." And I told her what to do, and she is running at a remarkably fast pace, eating and drinking everything that we have discussed. And I'm just so inspired to do that myself. I mean, I do it, but the faster the pace, the more the carbohydrates, so you have to actually eat more. So let me see how I can handle that.
Right. So, what are your challenges? What goals have you set for yourself when it comes to running?
Running, well, I will be running a marathon in February, and I hope to get the Boston qualifier. I would love to be able to go to Boston and run a marathon somewhere close to 3 hours 15 minutes. Let's see.
Okay. We wish you all the success for getting it achieved.
Thank you. Thank you.
You got your first 10 kilometer
Sorry.
with your mother. She's also into running, or she's left it?
Yes. Um. Well, she's a very busy doctor, and she does a lot of things. She does a lot of strength training. She does Pilates. She goes for her hill walks. She walks our dog. She does a lot of things. So she's way. I think when you're so busy and when you have very little time, you're very particular that you want to use that time to the fullest. So she's good. Yes, I did get my first 10 kilometers from my mother. And you need mothers to push you into running. And the first time even when I went to run, the way I started running was I went with my mother and her friend to a ground, and she was like, "You're so young, why are you walking? You should be running." And on that day, I ran 30 rounds of a 500-meter track I just ran it, and that's how it began. So with no Garmin and with nothing.
Great. So we can see the inspiration of your exercise physiologist and nutrition coming from.
Yeah.
Great, great. Okay, so my thing, we come across many athletes who are training with a high altitude. Who are having a high altitude training, planning to go for high altitude events. or going to a region which is very heat as compared to the home country where they are training. So in that situation, what would you suggest leads to know more, or tweak in their current nutrition plan and hydration, which would be very effective in managing the altitude or the heat which they are planning to go ahead with, and also to get a peak performance in both the conditions, climatic conditions?
Right. So, firstly, the athletes should know that uh, your body is going to be taken out of its comfort zone. The first thing that's going to be affected is your appetite. So, eating adequate calories, or maybe eating a little more than what you, or definitely a significant amount of more food than what they used to, is the first thing. Because be it altitude or be it heat, um, your appetite gets blocked. The rate of respiration even at high altitude is higher than what it is at sea level, and the same it is in heat. So the amount of fluids that you would need to be drinking also need to be significantly higher. Obviously, do not waste your fluids with water. You want to make sure you make every drop count. Drink a suitable electrolyte. If you are going for high altitude training, check your serum ferritin levels or check the iron stores in your body, because your body is going to make more red blood cells. It's going to undergo like a good amount of erythropoiesis, so that the oxygen delivery is not hampered, because you're not only going to high altitude, which in itself is like a huge task for the body, but you expect it to exercise. So it's going to stimulate the production of red blood cells. And if you don't have enough serum ferritin, or if you don't have enough stored iron in the body, this may get hampered, and you will really, really get fatigued. So please check your serum ferritin levels, take a supplement if required, definitely take a supplement, and then go to the high altitude training camp. Wear appropriate clothing in high altitude. It's going to be cold, so layer up and then layer down. Because if you layer up and you do your entire training session, the sweat is going to evaporate, and you're going to feel very, very cold. So layer up and layer down as you warm up through the exercise. Uh, now, when we go to the other side, when we talk about heat adaptation, you want to do everything you can to reduce your body temperature, because your body temperature is going to increase, because not only are you in a hot climate, but you're also exercising. So try and drink beverages, preferably salty beverages, which are colder even during exercising, so that you drink more, because cold beverage promotes drinking, and your body temperature is reduced. You will not feel like eating, but you must get into the habit of eating a minimum of 60 grams of carbohydrates every hour. Heat produces more sweat loss, even if you are not a salty sweater. Otherwise, you would be sweating out a huge amount of sodium. 1 gram per hour is the average for all athletes. And when you go into these non-conducive conditions, sweat losses or salt losses from sweat get even higher. So your drinks need to have 600 milligrams of sodium, if not more. Take in salt tablets before and after training. Eat salty things, like eat salty chips, which again are very easy to eat on low appetites. In high altitudes, eat whatever literally you can raise your hand, you can put your hands on, because you are going to be losing body weight. It's cold, it's high altitude, appetite is affected. Don't go into the specifics of whether this is carbohydrate, what type of carbohydrate it is. You're going to be using all of that to maintain your body temperature and to facilitate movement.
Okay, okay. Maitri, we come across many athletes because of being anxious about their events or their performance, they happen to overtrain themselves, and that's a syndrome which comes across quite often with people. How, as a sports physiologist, would you recommend, or what signs should athlete keep in mind or watch out for when it comes to overtraining?
Yes, so the principle of less of the principle of more is less does not apply to sports. It's actually less is more. You want to maintain the integrity of your joints and tendons. You don't want to overdo it before your actual race. But a lot of people think that if they do a little bit more than the required distance, then they feel mentally satisfied, and this could at times lead to what is called as overtraining. So overtraining is when your body doesn't really adapt to the training load. It just goes completely out of whack. Like your body is on one side and your training is on one side. Loss of appetite is a very big symptom. It's a very big sign of overtraining. Not sleeping enough, not feeling like you've exercised even though you may have done a killer exercise session, not being mentally involved in the exercise. All of these are symptoms of overtraining. Overtraining, if it happens for a prolonged period of time, and it can lead to something called as relative energy deficiency syndrome. So energy availability is a concept that is basically, it is the amount of energy you have available after the energy for exercise has been taken out. It's whatever food you eat minus the calories required for exercise. You divide all of this by the fat-free mass that you have. It's complicated, but basically it is the amount of calories which remain after everything else has been done. Basically, all the exercise has been done. Is the amount of calories left for only you to function as a whole, to go to the bathroom, to study, to open the door, all of that. Because our heart, lungs, kidneys, digestive system, they will take a certain amount of calories regardless of what we eat and how much we burn in exercise every day, right? And we don't think of those calories, we forget them. We only think of fat, muscle, all of these things. But when a person has very low energy availability, that is less than 30 calories per kg fat-free mass available for that person to function as a whole, then the body basically starts shutting down. You may get palpitations, you may get tachycardia, your digestion could get affected, your hair will start falling, you may get fever. Every system of the body is affected, and that is called as low energy availability. People who are in low energy availability are called as those having relative energy deficiency syndrome. Okay, so it's called RED-S, and it's a huge red flag. So basically, knowing when to put the brakes is very, very important. Everybody loves to exercise. Everybody gets the exercise high. But so many times we think that unless we exercise at that particular intensity, we are sort of, we're not answerable to anybody, or we've done something really bad, or we're just not fit enough. Just because your neighbor hit some target in his or her exercise intensity session doesn't mean you, in your overtrained body, not having realized, are pushing yourself to hit the same target. Both of y'all are different people. Y'all have a different DNA type. Y'all have different lifestyles. Y'all have had a different upbringing. You have different food choices. So do not set unrealistic expectations out of yourself. Don't train more than your very experienced, qualified professional coach has asked you to do. Know that there is only one body that I have to race in, so I have to look after it instead of banging it in every training session. All of that is very, very important to prevent overtraining. There's a very fine line in training really well and overtraining. And I think as you grow older in endurance sports, there's a reason why, age is favored. Being more in age is favored in endurance sports, because you're just mature, you respect your body, you respect the things that it does for you, and you know where to draw the line in terms of training. And that is why young kids may go the route of overtraining faster than somebody who's done a couple of more races. That being said, if you're getting into endurance sport in your 40s, and you suddenly like it, and you're looking great, and you're feeling great, and you think that more is better, that is also a dangerous way, could lead to overtraining. So I think, mindfully thinking about your body and mindfully accepting that my training is done and I need to stop now. And I need to eat even if I don't feel like it. Because it's just, it's a requirement for the body to take in the impact of the training session, to adapt from it,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so on. Yeah.
That's rightly said. Okay, so we come to the end of the podcast. The last question for the podcast is, what advice or what piece of advice would you like to give our listeners in regards to the pointers which they should keep in mind when it comes to exercise physiology and sports nutrition?
So all of us, like I said, have only one body to live in, and what the body needs is movement. Movement is medicine, nothing else. No matter what car you have, what is the nature of your job, your body is not going to be happy unless you move it every day. Exercise physiology is that science which tells you that all of you, every inch of you, is going to benefit even from a little movement. So you don't have to invest in a very fancy gym, you don't have to go spend 3 hours. The rule of American Council of Sports Medicine is, if you can do a movement for 10 minutes and if you can do it 3 times a day at whatever time is comfortable for you, is good enough. It's going to make you way more healthy. It's going to make your body really happy compared to what it was earlier. With regards to nutrition, it's not about going to the quinoas and the blackberries and the avocados. That's really, if that makes you happy, you can go that way. But sticking to basics, sticking to simple home cooked food, eating something that you know what it contains. If you take a cereal box, there are 10 ingredients that you don't know. Stay away from those kind of foods. Having good quality protein in majority of your meals, not because it's going to facilitate muscle growth, but because it's going to take care of your immunity. It's going to make sure that all the chemical reactions that happen in your body actually happen and don't stop or stall, which is why you need to and it's going to give you a lot of energy. It's going to reduce your cravings. It's going to reduce the improve the sleep quality. Nutrition, the simpler it is, the easier it is, and the more effective it is. That is definitely something I like to tell people. And everybody, regardless of social status, financial status, has equal right to good movement and good nutrition. A lot of us tend to get obsessed with the weight on the scale. Guys, let's look at the bigger picture. Weight is just a gross representation of your muscle weight, your bone weight, the amount of water that is stored in your body. And we expect immediate results in terms of weight loss or weight gain, when the process of weight gain or weight loss has not been instant. Our body will take in all of the crap that we are putting in and keep quiet until one fine day we'll realize that, oh my god, I no longer fit into this denim, or oh my god, I have lost so much weight. So be patient, work with your body, because it's working with you regardless of where you are, regardless of what you're eating, how little you're sleeping. Your body is there showing up for you. If you decide on a health goal, show up for your body. Don't be impatient. The more crash the diet is, the more unsustainable it is going to be in the long run, and it's not going to be a great idea for your body. It's just going to get more and more stressed. So show up for your body, give it the good food and the good nutrition, and give it the little movement that it's asking for. It's not going to be difficult if you don't think too much about it and just execute. Preferably, if you have the time, consult a qualified exercise physiologist, qualified nutritionist, so that they can really help you with their professional expertise.
Many thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Till then, stay fit, stay strong, and raise above.